Every year I have the great pleasure and privilege to go through a process of producing publications with my students at De Montfort University. And it really is a joy because I see them go through the entire process, coming up with the initial concept, working through to the practicalities of layout and design, and then finally emerging at the end with a publication, often a physical book, which they can submit, obviously, for this assignment that we do, but also that they can have as something of great pride for themselves, rightly so, because the work they produce is quite extraordinary. And it's, to me, the highlight of my year working in the university. This year is going to be somewhat different because we are teaching at a distance through videos, through video conferencing and all that sort of stuff because of the pandemic. And so I thought it might be an interesting thing and perhaps a helpful thing if I were to go through this process myself and to share all the stages that I went through in producing a physical book. And so that's what I'm going to do. And this is the first of those videos. And instead of just holding those for the students, I thought I would share them more widely. So here we are. That's the background. What am I going to produce? What is the concept for my publication? Because that's the absolute first step to come up with that concept, the design idea. And what I've decided to do is something that's been in my mind for quite a long time, and that is produce a book of an in-world text that exists within my Gaslit Empire novels. So here's The Bullet Catcher's Daughter, and it opens up with an in-world quote from a book that exists within the made-up world, and it goes like this. There was once a line marked out by God through which were divided heaven and hell, and thus was chaos banished from the world. The devil created lawyers to make amends. They argued the thickness of the line until there was room enough within it for all the sins of men to fit, and all the sins of women too. The Bullet Catcher's Handbook. And every chapter thereafter, through a couple of books, does begin with a quotation, and more often than not it's from the Bullet Catcher's Handbook. So wouldn't it be nice to have a physical copy of this actual book to be able to hold in one's hand and to draw it out from that imaginary world into the world that we live in? And that's the idea. That's the basic concept of what I'm going to produce. I'm kind of nervous announcing that, saying I am going to produce it, because it makes it public and it kind of puts a bit of pressure on me. But then again, that's the pressure that my students are under as well. They've got to produce this thing for an assignment. So we've got the concept. Then I need to do some research about the format. What sort of format do I want? Do I want a standard paperback? Do I want a hardback? Do I want it to be in A format paperback or B format paperback? What sort of shape is it going to be? And to address this, I've been doing a bit of research, and I've come across this little book, which I've actually owned for a long time. It's A Midsummer Night's Dream, just a Shakespeare play, but produced in this dinky little format, quite small. And obviously the internal layout isn't going to be quite relevant because this is a play, but you can see that there is a certain relationship between the page size and the margin sizes and so on. And so I thought that would be a nice little model to work on. It kind of looks old. It's an object of pleasure in itself. You like to hold it and to open it up and to look through it. Also, as an interesting thing here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with the book that I'm going to be designing, but if you look, some little bits are in red ink, like this. And I like that combination of red ink and black ink. It's kind of interesting. So there we go. What format is this? Well, I can get a ruler and I can physically measure the dimensions. That's one thing I can do. Doesn't mean I'm going to be able to get a printing company to actually produce something of those dimensions. That may not be a standard form that is used anymore. But there's a size that's quite similar to this, a little bit different, which would be the A6 size. So all familiar with an A4 sheet, fold that in half, you get an A5 sheet, fold it in half again, and you get an A6 sheet. And this, although this is slightly more squat, slightly more square than A6, it's nevertheless quite similar. And I do know, because I've done a bit of research, that I can get printing companies to produce things in A6. So I'm thinking of going for that. That's where I'm going to lay it out. That's how I'm going to lay it out, rather. The next thing I had to think about, and this is something that's been bothering me for a little while, because I have had this idea in my mind for a while, is what font to use. Now that sounds like an incredibly geeky sort of question, what font to use. But actually, even those of us who are not experts in fonts and design, we pick up a lot of meaning from the font that things are written in without ever thinking about it. And what I wanted to evoke with this design was a time probably in the 17th century. And so I wanted to look for a 17th century font. Now, having said that, the logic of this doesn't make sense. When you really just think about it in logical sense, in my world of The Bullet Catcher's Daughter, this is something that is happening within a more modern time frame than that. This story is taking place rather more recently. And indeed, if this were compiled, if the Bullet Catcher's Handbook were compiled, we can imagine it being compiled sometime in the 19th or 20th centuries. And so it doesn't really make sense. But this is going to be operating beyond that kind of logic, because I don't believe people reading the book will think, this font looks more like a 17th century font than a 19th century font, and therefore it doesn't work out with a timeline. I think what happens is people take the feeling away without ever entering their logical mind. So I've searched around and I have found this font, IM Fel English. Now, this font is one that really somehow magically captures the sense of that 17th century feeling. So I'm very, very pleased with that, and I'm going to be trying to use that and see what it looks like. The next thing that I'm going to be looking at are ways in which I can illustrate this book, because I think it's going to be quite a slim book. The number of entries I have in the Bullet Catcher's Handbook are quite small, and so there's not a lot of pages, so I do want some illustrations. So I have found, and I'm going to share this with you here, a number of copyright-free images which are in the public domain, which are things like this. Now this is a frontispiece from a book, and this kind of woodblock printing here, it very much evokes that time period of the 17th century. And so what I can do, obviously this is a frontispiece for a different book, but I can then do this by hollowing it out. Okay, show you, take out the middle, leaving me a gap, And then, of course, I can put in my own text like so. And you'll notice that I haven't actually gone for quite the layout that the 17th century version has. But if we go back and we have a quick look at that 17th century layout, it's actually quite odd in a modern sense. See the word confession. This starts off in large type, carries on the next line in smaller type, and so on. And I think that was a kind of normal thing in the 17th century, but now it looks very, very strange. So in my my own version, I'm going with something which looks more contemporary, but hopefully still evokes that earlier time period. Okay, so is that a piece of layout that I'm actually going to be using in the book of this shape? Well, no, if you'll notice, have a look at the shape of that book and how I swap back in this. They are a different shape. So clearly I'm not going to be able to use that directly in here. What I've done with that piece of design work is more a proof of concept for myself, that I can do something that feels roughly right. And I can in the end squash that image a bit, and it won't look too wrong. So I'm happy enough that there is a concept here and a kind of layout and a kind of format that will work. And what's more, I've got, having chosen that A6 format, I'm certain that I have printers who will be able to take it, and I've already had a quick look at the price calculators of some of these printers and worked out that I can print even in hardback this thing for a not too great an amount of money. So it would be viable to be able to print some and sell them. Not something I'm going to make a huge amount of money out of, but it's something that I would hope to not make a loss from doing. And I'm going to be putting in more of these videos as we go along with the design process. So I hope it's useful and I hope it's interesting for you.